Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nevin Gussack, your host of New Ideas, and with me is a recurring friend of the show and guest, Dr. Pat Choate, who's an economist, former vice presidential candidate, or running mate, I should say, to Ross Perot in 1996, and has been a consultant to various corporations and state governments and the federal government. He's also a prolific author of books that have shaped my economic ideology and analysis, books like Dangerous Business, Agents of Influence, Saving Capitalism, Hot Property, and others that I'm probably missing right now. Welcome back, Pat. How you doing today?
Hi, Nevin. It's good being with you.
Yeah, good being with you as always. I got my hot tea with honey, ginger tea with honey, because it's, by Florida standards, it's kind of cold out there, so I stay warm here.
Let me get mine. I'm drinking Earl Grey.
All right, good deal. Good deal. All righty. So, Pat and I were talking off the air and had an interesting topic for our next show. Some of you may or may not know Pat Choate. He's a father. He also has grandkids. And he wants to get, quite understandably, his grandkids to learn how to think and to think critically and analyze issues, making decisions based on facts. And I got to tell you, I started to rack my brain, probably because I was thinking in terms of older adult academic books. Right. So I'm not going to, no offense, Pat, I'm not going to say that a 5 or 10-year-old kid, unless they're a brilliant prodigy, should read Dangerous Business or Saving Capitalism. I'm not going to say that. I love you, Pat, but books, they changed my life, but I can't say that. And you know what I started to think of? I used to not like social studies when I was really young. I know that's going to shock everyone in the audience here. I did not like social studies. I didn't like history. I didn't like politics or any of that. I know that's puzzling everybody here. Probably you, Pat. But my stepfather and my mother were the ones who got me interested. And how? And it started with as a kid by reading factual sources that I was intelligent enough to read. But before we go that, I think we have to start out, from my opinion, is facts can be great, but they can be interpreted in any different way. And if you don't have the right moral framework to frame an analysis, you can use all kinds of facts and say, well, it was the Jews who did it, or the capitalists who did it, or look or see, the working class is lazy, or this religion is more superior than the other, and oh, you shouldn't like other people with other skin colors, whatever. See, Pat and I come from a civic nationalist, what used to be viewed as a civic small r Republican view that unfortunately in modern politics doesn't exist. And Pat and I are hopefully trying to make our efforts to rebuild that. And if Pat wants to do that with the younger generations within his family, I think that's a very laudable goal. So I would start out with establishing the moral framework first by introducing the parables, like the parable of the Good Samaritan, for example, the parable of the prodigal son, and other elements or other parables within the Bible to do that. And that has been converted, I believe, into children's literature. To encourage a civic small r Republican nationalism that embraces diversity of social classes, of races, of religions, etc. One book that I read to Emily, which is my daughter, her mother and I, back when we were married and Emily was younger, we encouraged reading to the nth degree. And one of the many books we read to her ever since she was a baby, literally ever since she was born, was Todd Parr, T-O-D-D, and then P-A-R-R. He wrote books, children's books, easy to read, called This Is My Hair, and other books on those themes that introduce your children to diversity and whatnot, that accepting differences, based on physical characteristics, social class, race, whatever. Not differences per se of moral character, but differences that, hey, it's okay if you have hair that might be a little different than mine, which tends to be thinner and lighter and blonder, that kind of thing. Because you have to, if you want to build your children or grandchildren to accept certain facts, interpret them in a way you would like, you would have to first build a certain value structure. And then, of course, you could teach them as they get older the basic values of the Constitution and certain basic economic principles, and we can return to books that are appropriate for children at that point. Basic civics building. As they get older, what I would do, and this worked for me, is it worked for me because my mother and stepfather, we would always sit around the dinner table and we would listen to the news, mainstream news. They would always have conversations about it. And of course, kids are going to want to know what their parents are talking about. They're going to want to feel included. They want to fit in with their parents. So you start discussing with those kids and you're blah, 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 blah. You're talking and you're like, hey, Charlie or Sarah, what do you think of what we're talking about? Do you got any opinions about what they're saying on the TV, or what your mom and dad are thinking, or what Grandpa Pat Choate is thinking or saying, or grandma's thinking? And you start to include that because that started to encourage me to become interested in politics. And until the 8th grade, really, I was not interested in social studies. I mean, I was good at it. I got good grades in it. I had to do what I had to do, but it really was not my thing at the time. But through various things, my stepdad and my mother got me interested in that. And then as they get older, what I would do is I would have them read books like 1984 by George Orwell to give them an anti-totalitarian edge. My mother recommended that off of a summer reading list. I read it, and that helped crystallize my extreme distrust towards totalitarianism as actually practiced, and their deceitfulness and their masking their evil ideology or evil way of ruling with very good intentions and legitimate grievances. So that in a nutshell is where I'm coming from. I don't know if that helps you, but I did quite a bit of thinking about it. And, you know, you also might want to do, I did an AI search. I've been having a lot of conversations since November. I haven't told you this with ChatGPT and Grok. And you literally can have almost quasi-human conversations with them. And I talked about this over the past 2 days with ChatGPT, and they also recommended other books, such as, for example, Aesop's Fable, which, of course, no brainer there. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts about what I said. I hope it helps you, or maybe I'm telling you what you already know.
No, it's very useful and helpful. The issue I have, and I think many grandpersons have, is we're now dealing with children, in my particular case, that have gone to very good public high schools. They have a good background in social studies. They have a good background in literature. These kids come out of the Orange County system of public schools, which are very good. Mm-hmm. You know, in the 10th grade, they're reading the Odyssey, figuring out what's there. So that is good. Now, you know, they have those sorts of basics, and they're going into college. They're at the freshman and sophomore level of college. And so as a grandparent, you really have no control over them in that sense. They're going to college and they're acquiring basic knowledge and skills. And so then the question really becomes one, is to convey to the idea of them, if they're going to both have a satisfying and moral life, and both these young people do. They're good people. They're gone to church. They have, I think, excellent moral, boundaries and lines, and understood that. So the question is, as they get ready to go into the world, is now that they have these basic skills and are acquiring more in college, how do they come to learn how to think analytically? How do I encourage them to learn how to find fact-based sources of material so they can deal with reality? And in this case, the goal is not to have them come to the same conclusions that I come to, but to have a clear, to be able to develop their capacity to develop a clear understanding of the world and in its reality, and recognize that you have very powerful forces that are trying to cast reality with a slant and a bent to their own needs. And so you start out, to me, you begin with the question of the Constitution. What does it really mean? What is the structure of our system of self-governance really like? To understand that and to have an understanding of it as an informed citizen, not as a lawyer, to the technique. So that is one thing. And then secondly, to understand the economic system that we're in, capitalism versus socialism versus communism, the isms, and the way that different societies work. That becomes important, I think, in doing it. And then just to have daily sources of fact-based information and news reporting that is reliable. And then how do you engage them in this, that in a society, in a time where everyone is dealing with smartphones and all of the social media and other apps and the disinformation and propaganda that's out there. So that is the challenge. So I start off with the assumption there's been all this pollution of social media and false sources of information. And so the challenge is find what are some of those sources, what are some of the things that you think it's important for them to understand, and realize they're only initially going to spend a small amount of time on it. So how do you do the book and build the interest and expand it and do it in a way where it's very clear that I am not propagandizing them to have my views?
Oh, wow. I didn't know how old your grandchildren were. I thought they were very young, so I didn't know. So I was basing it on that. And this question, the way you posed it, have you ever seen the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield?
Yes, I have.
Do you remember when Presser towards the end, when he was getting the oral examinations, and the economics professor, ironically enough, said, "I have a question, only one question, in 27 parts." And the way
well, it is a challenge.
Oh man, I'm sorry to do that to you. I'm glad I made you laugh. I like making people laugh, actually, but it's a really good question, and it is going to take longer than 30 minutes to discuss this, perhaps. But look, I think it's a good question. I think number one, I'd like to ask you, what are their intellectual interests and what are their concerns? That's the first thing I would ask, because we don't want to propagandize to what they think. They need, if you want them, let's say, in your heart of hearts to come to your conclusions, they have to come through it on their own. That's how I've grown from being a free market libertarian adjacent type of Republican to what I term now a radical civic nationalist. What I will say is, I hate to say it, I would avoid TV news and talk radio in entirety. To use social media only, like X, formerly known as Twitter, only to get a wide diversity of research papers and articles, and separating the ideology and the fluff from actually all the articles, all the research papers and book excerpts and book links. They're there. X or Twitter can be an excellent source of material for that. Secondly, you also have to encourage them to look at lived experience of different racial minorities, different social classes, religious groups within the tapestry of the United States. Lived experience is so important, because nothing, pardon the language that I'm going to use, but frankly, nothing pisses off average people more than the denial of lived experience. The idea that, oh, you're just lazy, Mr. Working Class person. And I sent you a text message of one such individual who's very bright, who just dismisses the working class as just crybabies and whining and everything else. And that has to be discouraged. Lived experience is very important. And thirdly, what I would do is encourage them to read books from all sides. If you want to teach them about economics, have them read your books. Have them read Milton Friedman, who is a lot simpler than von Mises when it comes to the defense of free market fundamentalism. Friedman is much easier to digest, as you know, textually. Have them, frankly, read, I'm sorry to say, also extremist tracts too, and have them read Karl Marx's manifesto and read about towards the end where Karl Marx writes out his program of nationalizing all property, creating industrial armies, despotic inroads of private property. Have them read fascist or national socialist literature. I mean, I know it sounds kooky and crazy. I've read Mein Kampf. I have it on my shelf. It has a whole section, a chapter called National Socialist Trade Unions. And sure, corporatism of the corporative state might sound great to even civic nationalists like us, but then you also have to look at the hidden things underneath the text too as well. And then a guy like me, I'm a history nerd, I deep further and I looked at the lived experience of how the factory owners reacted, let's say under fascism or national socialism, or the average worker in those countries, or in the Soviet Union or Cuba or China or Putin's Russia. And that's where the lived experience comes into it. So is there a specific book? There are so many books it's not even funny that I could recommend, some of which I did. But they have to read all sides. They have to come up with their own conclusions. They have to, you have to know where their hooks are. How I moved away from free market fundamentalism, and I still support capitalism and free enterprise just like you very stoutly. But it was little hooks, the anti-communist hooks, like Don McIlvaney. I don't know if you remember him from the 1980s, 1990s. He gave a lot of talks on prophecy conferences. He argued that Gorbachev's rule in Russia was a deception foisted against the West. But he wrote in his McIlvaney Intelligence Advisor all about the decline of the US economy under Ronald Reagan. Even though he proposed more free market policies to better America, which is kind of ironic, it made me go, here's a right-winger who's questioning Reagan and the Reagan record, and he's an anti-communist, and he points out the contradictions in Reagan's foreign policies between fighting the evil empire and not. So you have to know their hooks. People like William R. Hawkins and Anthony Horrigan. I'm sure you remember who they, well, Horrigan.
I know Bill Hawkins well. So
yeah. They are conservatives. Anthony Harrigan, he used to be the head, I believe, of the U.S. Business and Industry Council. And he was a columnist. He was from South Carolina. He wrote a column in the Spartanburg Journal Herald. Now, Mr. Hawkins, I've talked with him a few times. He's pretty cool. And Harrigan, who died in 2010, I believe. They are very conservative. They're very anti-communist. I mean, their literature, So they hooked me into critiques of Reagan too. So you have to know the hooks. What hooks could grab people to look at an issue a different way. You also have to read again the texts of all sides of an issue, even if it's just an essay. And let's say they don't have a time to read the book. And then I would not have them watch TV news. Forget it. Have them listen to podcasts. On the left, have them listen to Tom Hartman, if you know who he is, THOMHARTMANN. He is another one that got me against neoliberalism. He is a left progressive, but he still talks within a capitalist framework. And he's not a Marxist-Leninist. So he was credible in my mind. There was a guy who was an anarcho-communist, Jackinator, who I was on his program. And normally I have trouble with people on the far left. But with him, it was anti-Hamas, it was anti-Chinese Communist Party, anti-Putin. He had a history of anarcho-communist activism since he was young. He's about a little older than I am. And he had bad run-ins with Marxist-Leninists too as well. That built his credibility. So when he was critical of right-wing Zionism...
Can you hang on just a moment? I have the interview.
Go right ahead.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. Easy, igualmente la calle. No. Ahora, thank you, hijo.
Thank you.
Ahí va igual a la planta and everything, take the guys, you know.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
How about that in the car? It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. See you later, hijo.
I'm sorry.
So he had me look at some videos that were from credible sources. And then it helped inform my position on the Israel-Gaza conflict without sacrificing my principles. And that's another thing, a last point I want to make. There are, depending on the public library system or the university library system, there are courses where librarians will teach or professors will teach source evaluations. Just because something's in a magazine or a book doesn't mean something's credible. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
It's a very stark example. Don't take it personally. Okay, I know this is going to horrify you, but I'm making a stark example, more for my audience too. Recognize this book?
Yeah, I've seen that book before.
Yes. This is a great book, very credible, capitalist, nationalist, not hateful. It's a book.
Yeah,
There you go. This is also a book too.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God, Turner Diaries by Dr. William Pierce. All about a racial, national socialist, hateful, genocidal revolution as alternative historical fiction. They address capitalism in here too. It's a book as well. It's something written even by a highly educated man. He was a professor of astrophysics, Dr. William Pierce, who the author's pseudonym is. Doesn't mean it's credible in my eyes. Even if they might have a few critiques of conservatism or capitalism. This was published during the Reagan era, of course, that might be somewhat credible or understandable, and it's a book and it's by somebody educated. But frankly, the worldview is crap. So you got to do the source differentiation too as well. Something might look academic or be published by an academic, but it might be awful. So Holocaust denial literature, denial of the Ukraine famine under Stalin in the Soviet Union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they have to recognize evaluating sources and evaluating propaganda versus something that is fact-based, and also you understand what the author's intention is too as well. So I hope that's helpful. I'm thinking of that extemporaneously, given that now I know your grandchildren are older.
Well, as I take a look at it with these kids and with their friends and others that I have met, their primary focus is on just getting through college, getting the degree, getting good grades in their courses. In other words, they're empty vessels that somebody else is pouring information into, and they really don't have the skills at this point to do the critical analysis that is required. One of the things that I have thought about is and recognize it requires a discipline to sit down with books such as you write and such as I write. You have to have an inquiring mind and a discipline to go through the arguments and the facts. And though we do our best to give parables and stories and make it fast and easy and intriguing reading, it really doesn't compete with most of the Netflix shows that they can watch. And so the issue is to feed this in small bites. One of the things I've thought about is to saying, for example, you start out with the assumption they have some fundamental understanding of the Constitution, which is one of the most important documents ever written. It's a form of government that billions of people emulated and revered, and so a basic understanding of that. So one thing I thought about is doing a syllabus or a quick read of the high points of the Constitution. The second is to start off and compare capitalism with other systems that are used around the world. This goes back to Carney's speech at Davos. In about 500 words, he acknowledged the shift in the world order that is now underway, and that acknowledging that many of our fictions that we have based our policies on are just that, fictions. We are living in a global economy where you do have hegemons that have tried to impose a set of global rules on the rest of the world, or are playing against the rules as they exist to cheat. And with Russia, it's the Soviet model brought forward in time. And with the United States, it's our form of capitalism. And with China, at this point, it is a very sophisticated form of old-fashioned mercantilism as they deal with the world. And so we have so much propaganda trying to explain the world in capitalist terms, when in fact about 70% of the rest of the world tries to operate with different economic systems. So there was a book in the 1950s written by Robert Heilbroner called The Isms. And he basically explained, he cut it right to the bone of what is capitalism, what is National Socialism, what is communism, etc. And so one of the things I thought about is just simply taking that book and abstracting it down to anywhere from 5 to 10 pages, and use that as a basis of discussion with them. The whole point here is a little tiny shock therapy to say, here's what you're being told, here's what you read every day, but here's this reality. And to also get them to read Carney's speech and just say, what you're going to live through for the next 40 or 50 years is the devolution of the world order that was put in place after World War II and existed for 80 years. You're going to see that change. And your life, your economic, your career, your profession is going to be defined within that. So you start with the isms, where they come together, and identify the rules-based order that we have, and then simply say, now we're going to have a new mesh. So what I'm suggesting is I need them to have is a framework in which they think about this. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, is to get the framework on how they think about it. And then the second thing is, since both of these kids are going to go into business and business related activity, going into the profession as such, is to say, okay, let us discuss within the capitalist system itself the foundations on which you compete. And 40 years ago, I did a paper on this, and I intend to update it. And basically what I argue is that in the capitalist system, you compete, that you're taught that you're going to compete on 5 foundations. Price, you're going to have a better price, and so you win that way. Quality, you sell a better quality product. Innovation, you have innovation that you just leap over the technology. And the fifth is marketing, that you take this property and you are. So you do some combination. You find your strength there, you try to do all the strengths: price, service, quality, marketing, innovation. But what I want to teach them out of my life experience is that there is a 6th foundation, and that 6th foundation is public policy. It is, in our capitalist system, what we try to do is have the state and the public sector set the parameters against which you compete. So we have trust laws, so you don't form cartels. You have the Federal Trade Commission, so you don't have any anti-competitive practices. From the very beginning of this country, as part of the Constitution, we put in patent and copyright laws that say to the creative person, if you invent something really great, and as an incentive to do that, if you write something that's good, that's out of your own, whether it's good or bad, that creation out of your mind, whether it's an innovation or a book or an article, you have an exclusive right of use of that for a set period of time. And then, because in exchange for this right of exclusive use, you will share this with the rest of the society, and after some point, everyone can use it. It's the progress clause of the Constitution. So one of the things that we have is you have a set of protections against that. You have a set of protections against monopolistic power. and activities. You have within the context of public policy, you have the foundation of a sound economy, and that is enforceable contracts. You can make a contract within our system, and you have the means to go to court and enforce that contract as such. Now, the reality is, in so much of our business today, it's the whole question of how to get around that, how to change the public policy, how to hamper your critics by denying them use of certain assets, how to do a regulatory system that favors you and disadvantage the competition. And so the question for a person entering business today, they must master and understand the public policy dimensions of doing business. The most successful companies are increasingly those companies that not only excel at price, quality, service, innovation, and marketing, they also excel in advancing themselves and hampering their competitors through public policies, up to and including getting the public sector to finance the risk and give them the profits that come of it. It's socialism for investment, it's privatization for the distribution of wars. So, there's another area, is how quickly get them intrigued. The main thing is to get them intrigued in this. Another area that I think is important is to have them to understand the monopoly of the two-party systems in power inside this country. And in that, it is how various groups within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are always in constant, perpetual conflict to gain control of the party and then use their control of party to gain control of our governance. And through that, to impose their values and their economics on them. This is not a simplistic system as taught in high school. It is a very complex system, and you have an industrial political complex of consultants, advisors, media, etc. And it is I want them to understand how that works so they can then discern that. And again, I really don't care if they have my views, or I just want them to be able to analyze it, because in the dynamics that we now face, they've got to analyze that perpetually. It's always changing. You've got to analyze the circumstance. The circumstance that we have right now is vastly different as it was in, let's say, 2012, when Barack Obama was president. And the Republican Party was very different, and the Democratic Party was very different. So as informed citizens, I want them to have that kind of understanding. And then it comes to the question of what sort of basic news and information do they get? And this changes over time. For example, I think good sources are Apple News, and there are other systems. And they're good because for a relatively modest amount, $30, $35, you have access to literally most of the important magazines and think pieces and contemporary journals of our time. I spend every Saturday morning just going through and reading various magazines, right and left, on the articles that come out. That's a habit that I would like for them. I'd like them to develop a curiosity of that. And then if you want to know what's happening in the economy, I think it's important for them to have some basic sources. I think the Financial Times is very good. I think the business pages of the Wall Street Journal are very good to what's happening and what's continuing. The Economist is very good. And, I'm going to encourage them later on is to read and understand and learn how to read the monthly reports of the Department of Labor. I mean, when you get into those tables, there is so much information there where you can really have a good understanding. And it doesn't take much time. And once you get in and understand it, no one can really propagandize because you're dealing with the numbers. What we have on both sides, all sides, left, right, middle, etc., fringe, they're taking and interpreting the numbers. I'd like these young people to be able to do that on their own. Those are some of the things. And I'm dealing with a limited attention span. I've got, when I deal with people, to make the most of that time. But most of all is in intriguing them into understanding that disciplined thinking is like any muscle that's built up over time by using it.
No, I think these are all really good thoughts because I'm learning more about who your grandchildren are. So I took a couple of notes. I think, but there's to get to that point, minus Apple News, it's going to have to be done gradually. Again, I don't know your grandkids. I've never met them. What I would do is, in addition to everything that you've outlined, what I would like to add, I should say, to what you were outlining, gradually talk about, I'm sure you do this already, but you continue to do it, hopefully, gradual talking about business issues. If it comes up, hey, how's classes? What you're learning, what are your thoughts? Just different things. And as they ease into the business world, talk about what's going on in the companies that either they work for or maybe down the line they start, and use that as a hook to introduce them to everything that you're already outlining. Encourage them definitely to use the library if they don't already, and to become massive library users. Most libraries offer good public library systems in large urban areas. University libraries definitely, as you know, offer access not only to print, but especially electronic periodical databases. So they have to access that for free at no charge with their library card. If they have that hunger to find out more as a result of probing them for the next number of years, God willing, you're alive for many years ahead, and just continuously engage them on these issues and probe them. When you're explaining systems differentiation, as you mentioned earlier, in addition to what you said, I would differentiate the many different types of capitalism. As Nick Hanauer is a famed near billionaire, and he's a capitalist reformer, he says there's all kinds of different capitalisms, just like there's all kinds of different pies. As he said, cherry pie versus dirt pie. There's neoliberal capitalism, there's this, that. Start introducing the different types of capitalism, and then draw it into American history. Even if you mentioned creating a syllabus, do a syllabus. What I would recommend is a syllabus where you would outline the different types of capitalism throughout even American history, let alone the world, and also get some good quotes by a couple of leaders, American school, neoliberal school, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. I could send you some quotes that I use in my essays. And even if you don't want them to read Teddy Roosevelt's collected essays, and he has those books, and they are long, come up with some quotes. If you don't have them, I'd be happy to pass whatever I have in my writings on to you from FDR, Teddy Roosevelt, and some of the American school people. And because you're right, they have short attention spans. Apple News is a very good source. Twitter also has news summaries too as well, not just in the different posts, but also news summaries that just as solid summaries of stories if they're on X. And thirdly, if you want cold press release type of news, there's the French press agency, or Agence Presse Française, Deutsche Welle, Associated Press, United Press International, and other sources that you could use too as well. The BBC is another source, both print or electronic, print electronic, as well as televised news. So I would have them encourage them to listen to that, because I mean, American news just is useless. I mean, it's just like, I'm sorry, it's just, other than local news, the national cable news has gone downhill. It really has.
They're selling clicks. That's it. They're
Yeah.
trying to be honest to sell ads. They don't have a mission other than profit.
Exactly. That's why CBS News, the former head of CBS News, was quoted right around the election of 2016 that even though they don't agree with Trump, supposedly, they love Trump because he's bringing ratings. And that's why they maximize his coverage and all the rest of it. You know, so that can be deeply problematic. So that's what I would do. But again, I go back to my point on hooks, about hooking them into through conversations, which, you know, knowing you after these years and talking to you at least on these formats, and hopefully we'll meet in person one day and spend time with each other, I get the sense that you're very involved, you and your wife, with your grandkids. You love your time with them, and same with your kids. You seem, I get the vibe that, this is not flattery, this is just a vibe. I get that you're a great dad. You worked hard at being a parent, I think, and juggling a lot of different responsibilities in your life. So I know you have these conversations with your kids. You wouldn't be literally asking me to do a show if you didn't care about this entire topic. And I do that with my daughter, and she does not like talking about politics and history. And there are some views that she earned through lived experience, and some of which, you know, concern me, but are not unsurprising given the environment that she is in right now. And use those opportunities to hook them. You know, say, yep, and that's what I would do. I mean, I don't know what you do, so I'm giving you, obviously, you know, advice.
We were talking the other day on this. One of the things I'm thinking about, being an author of books and an economist, is I'm thinking about doing a little book that takes all of this and puts it into a little book of what a business major, an economics major, a student, you know, haven't figured out quite the line, the through line on it, is putting this into a book. And I'm even thinking about hiring one of these grandkids to be a research assistant and putting it together and sharing the royalties. And fundamentally is the whole process of doing the book is itself such educating. When I was doing my graduate work at the University of Oklahoma, I was the research assistant for a man named Nelson Peach. He was my mentor for several years. And he had done a Principles of Economics textbook. And so here I was, 22, I had a bachelor's degree. and he was doing the third revision of that textbook. And so one of the things as he was rewriting it and doing it is had me read every chapter and tell him what I thought the message was. Now, that was so useful. He wanted to see what a young person taking economics would see. And I developed a profound understanding from the author of the book. I just think one of the advantages of writing, and one of the things that attracts me about writing books, monographs, and articles, is I am the primary beneficiary of it because it forces me to think through the issue of it. And so I've always said, I'm the one who learns the most in doing this book, or because I have to learn the subject and I have to be able to then express it to other people in a comprehensible manner. And so I'm thinking just that exercise might be useful. You know, I start out with these kids that they're all going to be good men. You can see that already. They're men, they're boys. They're going to be good men. They've got a good moral character. And in that sense, and good values, the question is just to begin the process of them to being able to do true fact-based analysis and not be overwhelmed by the flood of propaganda and nonsense that is spilled over them every day through traditional news and social media sites. I think having worked in business and government for many years, I was the assistant to the chairman of a major corporation with 77,000 employees. And we did business all over the world, TRW. And one of the things I learned in dealing at that level with those executives and with executives and their assistants from other companies is just how well informed they were. A key entry to those levels of executive leadership is you must be informed and you must be able to think. You must be able to analyze because you're making decisions that involve thousands of employees and millions, hundreds, if not billions of dollars of assets. And so the point is to be made, this is a career investment. This is not taught in most colleges or universities or most business schools. This is acquired life experience knowledge. And you need a framework. Then you're going to have all of this other information so you can sort it out and put it into a context. And for me, I'm just grappling how to do that to make it palatable and fast.
No, and I have some things to add. Now we're going to the top of the hour. Did we want to stop the recording and then do part 2, where I give my additional comments to what you were saying and continue the conversation?
Let's just carry it on at this hour. Let's have a complete.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. All righty. Well, a couple of things I wanted to add to what you're saying, and I think this is so far a really good back and forth. I hope I'm providing helpful feedback. I think one of the most important things, and I think you are leading to this point, is intellectual integrity. That is so important. If you are writing a book, a small book, I think that is an excellent idea, not only for your kids, but for other youth, even people my age, and I'm 51. And I think that is so important. I think it's important for people of every age is to value intellectual integrity and somehow working, not only discerning fact from fiction or hyperbole, but also the values behind, outlining basic values behind good intellectual judgment. That is very important. His intellectual integrity. The other thing I would suggest to place in your book, and of course it's your book, a book proposal, is cover fact, discerning also what is fact versus fiction. Discernment is so important. When people are going through the news, when people are going through social media and they click on a link for an academic paper, a book excerpt, whatever, it's very important to evaluate who the source is. Are they going to have a potential bias either way? Are they overstating things? Another thing which just came to my mind right now is always question yourself. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be confident in your core values, your core opinions, or your core mission, but also question yourself too as well. Look at all sides. Sometimes, Pat, what I have found in studying geopolitics, history, economic history, is sometimes I don't want to say the two sides are always right, but multiple sides of an issue can be right about multiple things simultaneously. I don't know if that makes sense, but over the years, I have really come to believe that. And the example is the Arab-Israel issue. I'm a Zionist with many asterisks. I do not trust Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestine Authority, Iran, parts of the Israeli peace movement, at least historically in the Israeli left, or Arab peace proposals like Camp David Accords or the Oslo Accords, because you look at the primary literature of what the leaders of those movements and countries wanted as a goal. They wanted to conquer Israel, dismember Israel, discredit Israel, and they will use that under understandable peace rhetoric in order to instill a violent totalitarian regime. But I also take a look at also how the Israeli leadership undermines its image worldwide, how they trade with its own enemies underneath, which is a very embarrassing topic apparently in Israeli circles. I've written a little bit about that already. I also write about how there are real human rights violations, particularly under this current Netanyahu national unity government, and how there is a history within right-wing Zionists that are very genocidal and cruel. That is, not only from a human rights perspective, is horrifying. I mean, some of the things that they say is absolutely dehumanizing. It's really deeply disturbing. But on the other hand, it's also, from a strategic point of view, embarrassing to Israel. Now, as you hear me speak, I sound very unusual for a quote friend of Israel and a Jew, because everything is either you must support one tribe and that's it, no argument, or you have to support the other tribe, no argument, nothing. So if you don't like what Netanyahu's doing, you ever hear the discourse, it's always Hamas. Well, we're not going to talk about it. There's censorship by omission on both sides. And when you look at issues like that, it's deeply problematic. And that's unfortunately how American political discourse has degenerated over the past several decades. And what I try to do with my project is more and more, I'm trying to grow into a view where multiple sides can have elements of truth. And my first principles for civic nationalism, balanced and national capitalism, ceasefire in the culture wars, because we all have more in common as Americans, that unaccountable, highly centralized private power is just as detrimental as highly centralized, unaccountable government power is dangerous. But I process the facts not according to just merely, I like that tribe better than this one. It's more like, okay, what is credible? Is that person credible? Just like Jackinator, the anarcho-communist YouTuber. He was credible for me because he slayed sacred cows that many on the left did not. and do not want to slay or criticize. So I evaluate that source as credible. So that's where, again, to recap, intellectual integrity is very important.
Central.
It really is, because it does partially go back to values. The facts, along with also developing, and ChatGPT noticed this about my writing, is they said one of my cognitive strengths is pattern recognition. And I think if they develop pattern recognition of a disparate portion of historical facts, economic facts, and if they're able to process masses of information and infer patterns and then come to conclusions, that is a very important intellectual skill. And apparently, according to AI, I tend to do that in my writings. Also, discerning source material is very important. I would put, my recommendation is I would work all those things into your small book. I think the fact you're writing a small book is very important, not only for your grandkids, but it's also very important for other grandchildren and children here in the US too as well. And if you could mass market that, that would be good. Not to go on a tangent, that's something that you might even want to do a library program. Libraries love volunteers, especially credentialed one doing programs. That's something you might want to give back to the community. If you have the time or the desire, that's something to.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. You know, part of the role as a writer is a teacher.
Exactly. So what do you think about everything that I said so far? Suggestions, additions?
The important point to me is the foundation. It has to be is the intellectual integrity. Yeah, it as far as possible, it's important to lay it out in such a way, not to persuade, but to give guidance on how to approach the problem and how to approach the issue and learn it. And then let the outcomes be what they are on that. There'll be others that will be available to critique and argue both sides. The main thing is just to have a creditable base of understanding and knowledge, and based on documents that really matter, such as the Constitution, such as certain laws that we've put into place and policies. The other thing that I want to get across is that the Constitution is really a living document. It really is. It's not simply tiered to 1788 and 1789. It is towards a more perfect union is the key phrase there, is adapt to the changing times. And recognize that this experiment that we're in is so short-lived as such. Constitution will be 250 years old this year, this summer, 250 years old. I'm 84. I've been here for a third of the time that we've had this experiment. If you're 51, you've been here 20% of that time. That is a very short time.
That is true. That is the human lifespan. And I wanted to get back to the Constitution, about being a living document. I mean, there are early American leaders, I'm trying to open up the quotes here, who actually stated that. And this is where I think history is so important when discussing these issues, especially, different quotes. When you're mentioning these things, to your grandchildren, it doesn't have to be, here's a book. It'd be like discussing it, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, here's this quote by Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, who actually addressed this. Let me, there was a good Lincoln quote. Oh, I wish I had the quote. You'll have to forgive me. It's just, okay. Okay. Abraham Lincoln stated, "This country with its institutions belongs to the people who inhabit it. Whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it or exercise their revolutionary right to overthrow it." Well, that basically shows quite starkly and surprisingly, maybe to some, that Abraham Lincoln and other early leaders were for the concept of the Constitution as a living document. George Washington noted, "The basis of our political system is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government." So that's a direct repudiation of basically a lot of what the conservative, so-called conservative originalists say about the Constitution, because our first president, one of the leading founding fathers, directly repudiates that view. Then, I'm looking at my volume 2 of my book, Turning the Page, and my eyes just came across a quote by Senator Elizabeth Warren. And depending on your grandchildren, their temperament, if they like to have these deep discussions like you and I do, here's a quote that's a zinger that really made me think about government differently, the big versus small government. Which, I started to think in terms before I came across this quote, but it helped crystallize my thoughts. It made sense. It resonated with me. And she stated, Senator Warren, "It's not a question of more government or less government. It's about who government works for." So one of the things I find in American political discourse is people don't think in terms of systems and institutions and structures and incentives. It's all about tribe, ideology, culture war, or they'll invert reality to say that systems, that it's like there's a guy by the name of Curtis Yarvin of the Dark Enlightenment. He's tied in with the tech oligarchs and elements of the Trump administration. And he views the establishment as what he terms the cathedral. And he says it's journalists, media, and academia. And that's nonsense, frankly, to put it very charitably. What America is, unfortunately, particularly since the 1980s, is a plutocracy, or what I would term an oligarchy with democratic trappings. That's the problem with American discourse right now, I find. They're either misidentifying who the establishment is, as well as everything is based on vibes, emotion, tribe, ideology, prejudices, etc. And a toxic form of populism. Not what I term, which is what I support, and I believe people like you and others support, is what I term structural populism. Right. So what I would do is part of the issue is we have to look, as Senator Warren termed, things a little differently. It's not a question of vibes and emotions, it's who government works for, who are the real people in power, who are the competing interest groups. I'm talking about domestic politics. Who is deceiving whom and lying to whom? Why do people engage in activities like culture wars? What motivates the hardcore left? Institutions. What institutions are at play here? That's what I would also kind of mention, and I would humbly suggest in your small book, that kind of analysis to bring back more of a fact-based analysis as you and I apply in our writings. And what do you think about that? Does that make sense or no?
It makes a lot of sense. In fact, it triggers a thought. In some future shows, I think it would be interesting to me in a conversation with you to talk about, let's pick up on Carney's thought that we're now in a change in the global order, world order, that the post-World War II order is over, or it's fraying, it's going to be changed. And so then the question really becomes one. The Trump administration is now a lame duck administration. He, as FDR did in his first 6 months, he got his primary programs through. Roosevelt got the New Deal programs through basically in the first 100 days. He added some others as he went along, such as Social Security. With Trump, I think that is true at this point. At this point, he's just simply going to hang on and try to permanentize or institutionalize what he got. That means it's highly likely that we're going to have a change of administrations in 2029. And so the question is, as the New World Order changes, what are the essential steps that are taken in that first 9 months of the new administration? A version of 2025. What are the big things that we need to do? And I think it might be useful to take several elements and explore each in some depth. At least it will sharpen our thinking and hopefully of those who listen to this broadcast, their thinking on how to evaluate what needs to be done and what actually happens.
Well, I just was taking notes and writing everything down that you said. I think that's an excellent topic. The reason why I was kind of laughing to myself, for so you know, as well as the rest of the audience, that's like asking, what's your favorite food at the local Colombian or Cuban or Japanese restaurant? And I happen to like all three foods, and I have the most difficult time picking, because I think that's an excellent question, because I think I'm going to leave everyone with this thought. I think the biggest challenge that our government and our economic system and everything institutionally, how do we reignite national morale and institutional legitimacy, winning hearts and minds, as they used to call it? I think that'll be, in my view, agree or disagree, that might be one of the fundamental points that we can talk about in our next show that we'll schedule. But I think that's a brilliant idea that you had. Planning ahead, new administration could be Democratic. What do they need to do? And there are specific policy proposal steps, and there are ways doing it. It's not going to be easy, because it's going to require some major structural changes. And we have to prioritize which ones can be done by executive order or order through cabinet agencies. And we also have to look at the next majority, the next president, hopefully having, let's say, a majority party in both houses of the Congress. What laws can you get away with passing in Congress by using a little elbowing pressure, a la LBJ, in some ways FDR, to get a certain agenda or reform agenda passed? And how do we also deal with the Supreme Court? And then lastly is also, how do you engage in popular mobilization? As a president, you need to use the FDR and Reagan style communicator, constant press conferences, etc. So those are some food for thought that we can discuss for our next show on what a future president, starting on January 20th, 2029, what he or she will have to do to put forth the essential steps, as you termed it, for moving the nation forward in a positive way.
Maybe we can call this a series a more perfect union series.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. More perfect union.
And I would throw out 2 or 3 topics for each one being a show. One is how do we ensure an honest president and public officials? What does that really mean, and how do we do it? What is the rot created by the way that we finance our campaigns?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we solve that? A third one would be, what really is the financialization of the U.S. economy? And what should we do to change that? How can we do some laser-like actions that are politically possible to create a brand new dynamic? I mean, I think, let's talk about some of the fundamental changes and what's possible. That'll give our audience and us 3 years to work and refine that into something that is politically acceptable.
I think that's a great idea. And I think one thing we can explore is also behind a lot of these policies are a lot of emotions and ideologies and specific frameworks in play, and they're not pleasant. And I'll give you a little sneak peek from, again, just forgive me everyone on the show, and forgive me, Pat, for kind of doddering through my book, my Radical Civic Nationalism book, which is an encyclopedia. So when we talk about campaign finance, there's one quote that comes to mind by James Bopp, B-O-P-P. It's kind of an arrogant guy if you've seen him on YouTube or the news. And he was a Republican lawyer who is a big proponent of total deregulation of campaign finance rules. And he said in response to a criticism over his plans to establish a Republican super PAC, he said, the Supreme Court doesn't care, and I don't care, and the Federal Election Commission doesn't care. No one that matters cares. Now, the reason why I say we talk about the intellectual and ideological and emotional currents, and really language is important. The last phrase in Bopp's statement is very critical. No one that matters. That is very telling, isn't it, Pat? Because it tells us, oh, you little people, you don't matter because you're not at the cool kids table. You're not at the adults table. So screw you and go over to the uncool kids table because you don't matter, because you don't have enough money. You don't have enough status. And I close off and I say, okay, all the big money actors, and of course there are exceptions. You and I have met them. They're very patriotic business people. But most of what people identify as the big money people and the influential people, well, what did they really give us, Pat? They gave us a militaristic, still communist China. They gave us a strengthened Putin's Russia, despite real defeats on the Ukrainian battlefield. They gave us total deregulation and deindustrialization that ruined the checks and balances and the national security preparedness of the United States. Their arrogance and nastiness and cruelty has given us more anti-capitalism coming from fascism and communism more than it ought to be. So when we talk about these issues, brilliant points you have, I'd like to talk about the undertones. What is motivating all these rules and policies? And by me reading or you reading different policymakers like Mr. Bopp, we're giving the public an understanding of what these people represent. My style of commentary punches up to power, to quote, those that matter. They get me. They really, when people punch downwards, Pat, it really triggers me in a bad way. I do not like that kind of bullying. I'm not saying individuals without power or with little power should not have accountability and agency. They do. But we also have to understand that structures and institutions and incentives and power differentials affect people's daily lives. One other thing, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot before we close out. I think at one point, and frankly, I do not have to be in the forefront on this, but I would participate. I think at one point we need to have a conference. I am honestly, Pat, I am trying to create my own tribe, but I'm not doing this to self-aggrandize. But I think we need to, at some point, you have more networks and connections, but you, and I just sit there in the audience quietly and just schmooze with people. I don't care. But have a conference with people to address these issues from experts in different fields. And that, I think, will crystallize all of our efforts. I don't know what you think. I know that we can discuss this offline if you want. But
no, it's a good idea. But prior to that, we've got to have the questions crystallized and focused.
Correct.
Otherwise, these discussions run off into ideology, etc. We're going to have a chance in 3 years to make some transforming changes in this country that'll define it for years and years, decades to come. And it would be a shame to miss that opportunity. And so I look forward to you and I offline need to devise a list of very specific topics as I was laying out, as you were laying out, and then delve into this.
Yeah, we can do that for the next like 15 minutes. We'll end the show and we'll discuss this offline. And I think this has been a fantastic show. I think this is one of the best shows we've ever had, to be honest with you. And I want to thank you.
And helpful, because I really am figuring out how to encourage this with my own family.
Well, and this also humanizes us too as well. More about you as a person that many people probably did not know from watching you on an old YouTube video or a C-SPAN video or in your books, in some of your books. They might not catch that. So I think this has been excellent. I think the topic is very relevant for people of all ages on evaluating sources and what intellectual approaches they need to take in evaluating information. Pat, where can people find your works again, your books?
Oh, go to Amazon, go to the used books. You can buy them $2 and $3. Many of them are in really good shape, so save money.
Yep, here we go. It's one of the Bibles of economics. Everything you need to know about economics, Mr. Pat Choate, one of the best economists out here. And I'm not saying that to butter you up. He has changed my thinking 2008 onwards. I read, not this book, but I read Dangerous Business.
Yeah. Thank you, Nevin.
Thank you so much for joining us. And God bless everybody. Let's pray. Continue to pray for an improved country. We're all in this together. That's my phrase of the day.
Okay.
Phrase of choice.
Okay.
Okay.